No, Rob. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of Virtual Yoga. I'm Mike, your instructor. I'm glad to have you all with me today. And what we're doing today is a Yin Yoga practice. Yin Yoga is a very gentle, stretching style of yoga. Come here, Rob. Sorry, I have a cat who's up on this table. Come on, buddy. Get down. Thank you. So what we're doing again today, our Yin Yoga practice, stretching, holding some poses for a while. I was thinking about doing a spine series today, something that's a little bit more specialized. Again, more for the lumbar spine. We'll probably throw in other areas too, like the thoracic spine, that's the part that's connected to your rib cage. We'll throw in the neck as well. But we'll just kind of roll with it and see how it goes. And, if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the comments on Facebook. My better half is always on standby, and she can always yell those questions out to me if you happen to have any. But if you're ready, let's go ahead and begin our practice. But I guess before we officially start, you might want a hand towel. You may want a block or some pillows, yoga mat, blankets, anything that just makes you more comfortable. Maybe a cat. Go ahead and grab them and have them join in on the practice. But let's start it off in a comfortable position. You could sit down, you can lay down, wherever you are, just go ahead and close your eyes. Nothing to see at this point, but more to feel and pay attention to. And I want you to focus on your breath and breathe low in your belly, low in your diaphragm. If you'd like to double check if you're doing this correctly, place a hand on your stomach below your belly button. You'll feel the stomach expand when you take an inhale. It will contract when you take an exhale. And this is belly breathing. It's the breathing technique that I recommend for our practice. Again, it's a slower paced practice. We want to slow the body down. Breathing low in your diaphragm will help with that. It will slow your heart down. It will slow your nervous system down. It will slow your mind down as well. And again, today's practice, Yin Yoga, we're going to stretch, hold some poses for a while, roughly 3 to 5 minutes with each individual pose. Could be a long time, and I understand that. So if your better judgment leads you out of something early, let's say 2 or 3 minutes into a pose, you feel like you've had enough, you want to make your way out, it's fine. You don't have to hold the pose the entire time. But if you feel comfortable and you want to hold it the entire time, maybe even a little longer, that's up to you. My advice to you is to let experience be your guide. Let your body tell you what you need to do. But during the hour, again, if you need help, always feel free to type in these questions and comments on our comment section on the Facebook. Like I mentioned, my better half is always on standby, and she can always just yell these out to me as we go along, and then I can answer them throughout the practice. Go ahead and take a few deep breaths, and when you're ready, you can open your eyes. And we're going to start our practice off loosening up the hips and the spine. Here a little bit. You're going to lay on your back. I want you to cradle your legs. There you go. Rock up and down on your spine, side to side, make circles. Just using your intuition here to help wake up the hips and wake up the spine. The lumbar spine, like I mentioned, that's the lower back. It is something we will be working in today's practice, working it heavily. Try to crack your back if you can. Cracking is actually a really good thing. A lot of times it's just because your joints are fixated and they're stuck together. It's a temporary thing. But when we feel that crack, that's a release of those joints being stuck together. So you're creating that space in between the joint again, which is actually really important. I mentioned this a few classes ago. But the longer a joint stays fixated and stuck together, the more so it has a chance to fuse. And that means the joint is no longer a joint, it is now a bone, and it's never moving again, which is kind of a scary thing to think about. having a joint never being able to move again. And that can happen naturally if we don't move. So the point of being in a physical body is to be physical with it, to move around with it. Also, I would be playing music, but my iPod died today, so you'll have to bear with just my voice today. I hope that's all right. But let's go ahead and we'll come to a comfortable seated position. We're going to do our first pose. It's going to be for the inner thighs and for the back, but I'll throw in a hip opener option in case you would rather do more for the hips. But the first option I'm showing right now is butterfly pose, where you have the soles of the feet together in front of you. You fall in round in the pose best you can. Don't worry about getting your head to the feet. It's not the point of the stretch. Don't pull and yank with all your might to get down there. You're going to overstretch. It's almost guaranteed. So let gravity do most of the work. Let your body relax and soften into the pose. With this pose, you're supposed to feel broad inner thigh stretch and a broad back stretch that you can wave your hands to. Say, yeah, this whole thing is stretching. But if you're doing a butterfly and you say, I actually feel this more in my knee or knees, hips, back of the hips, localized straining, you're overstretching something, I would recommend doing a different pose. The dragonfly pose is usually the go-to, where you spread out your legs and you lean forward. You can get your inner thighs, you can get your back, you can also get a bonus hamstring stretch. If you're tight in the hamstrings, you might want to do this, but that's up to you. We are going to stretch the hamstrings next anyway. I usually will have a block with this one as well. Again, that's just my preference. After a while, I'll typically remove the block, usually after a minute or two. I want to loosen up first before I go into anything too deep. And if you'd rather have more of a hip opener, if you're doing butterfly pose, you could do reclining butterfly pose, where you have the soles of the feet together and you just lay on your back. Let gravity do all the work for you. It's more for the hips, to keep your pelvis and your sacrum level with the floor. So that's up to you. If your body today is saying, you know what, I could use more hips, then go ahead and do hips. But if your body's saying, no, I need to work my back today, well, you got your back options. If your body's saying, I am tight everywhere, feel free to do both. You can always bend forward for the first half and lay down for the last half, or even vice versa. I'm never picky about it. Just whatever your body is calling for, go ahead and do that. Because again, we want to focus on the intention of our poses. Do we feel the inner thighs and the back if you're rounding forward? You're never worrying about how deep you go, because it's not a competition, right? But again, breathe into it. Some deep inhales, some deep exhales. Allow yourself to relax in the pose. Again, we want muscles to soften. If your muscles refuse to soften, if they're flexing and they're engaging, we need to dial it back a little bit. That's something I'll talk a little bit more about as we go along in the practice, what exactly that is when your muscles are flexing, when you're doing a certain pose. But just so we know, just right off the bat, if you are noticing things are flexing, typically it's the quads that want to do it in a forward bend. We need to dial it back. And this is why I will often suggest listening to your body through the scale of stretching. The scale of stretching between 1 and 10. If 10 is your deepest stretch, go for 6 and 7, because you're less likely to overstretch there. You're more likely to relax and feel a nice moderate stretch, where it's not too much, it's not too little, but it's just right. I suggest finding the Goldilocks zone, right? And that's really subjective. It means what's too much, what's too little, but what's just right. Who knows what that's going to be for you, because your body is different from mine, and it's different from the person next to you. And that's okay. We're not concerned with what we look like. We're concerned with, do we feel the intention of the pose? And for this last minute, go ahead and relax. Take a few deep breaths, and when you're ready, there's a time. Just use your hands. Slowly push yourself out of the pose. Go ahead and lay back. Take your time. There's no rush to get to lay down. And while you're here, feel the rebound effect. How different does your body feel after holding that forward bend for about 4 or 5 minutes? I'm sure things feel different. So just go ahead and observe those feelings. Go ahead and take a few deep breaths, and when you're ready, you can come back to your comfortable seated position. We are going to stretch the hamstrings, but we're going to do this one side at a time with our practice today. And I'm going to throw out about 3 choices for you to kind of play around with. But the intention to stretch the hamstrings, it's the back of the extended leg. So right now, just again, for example, my left leg is extended. My right leg is the one that I'm going to be playing around with. And the pose that I'm doing right now, this is called a half butterfly pose. You got this one foot in towards the groin, and you're leaning over the extended leg. Every pose I suggest, you're going to be leaning over the extended leg. So you're going to grab something like the knee, shin, ankle, around the foot, toes, if you can grab them. Not a toe touching competition, so if you can't, don't worry about it, right? It's not the point of stretch. The point is to feel the back of the leg. You will also feel your back, but it's going to be more of a side. So if you're stretching your left leg, it's lower right side of the back. And I'll throw out a couple of modifications for that too. But this is one option. The other option, it's really just playing around again with this opposite leg. This pose is called half frog, where you turn this opposite leg in with internal rotation. Again, same deal to lean forward over the extended leg. Something you want to be mindful of. How does your knee feel? How does your hip feel? For example, I'm not even bending forward. I feel knee pain and hip pain. This is really, really uncomfortable. I never do that pose. But there are plenty of people out there, because the way their femur and their hips are shaped, they're actually going to prefer to do that particular pose. But again, that's a skeletal difference. It's not a flexibility thing. So please just keep that in mind. But if all else fails, you could always just do a dragonfly pose and just lean over the one leg you're going to stretch, right? We're going to stay on this one side for about 4 minutes. So let's get comfortable into it. You may want to even consider using a prop. This is where the hand towel or a strap, if you have one. Some people have a Pilates ring. They can throw it over their foot here and use it for leverage to pull forward. But I've been suggesting this. Try not to pull back so much. You're going to lose the back stretch if you pull back. And half the reason why we're doing this is to bend forward, right? We're doing a spine series today, so we're doing a lot more work for the lumbar. Settle in to it, but let me throw out a few more modifications. Your extended leg. You don't have to lock the knee down. In fact, if you'd like to, feel free to let this knee bend a little bit. You might be able to round a little bit more into your back, right? There's more spine work here when the knee is bent. And feel free to even put a prop under it. If you have a block or a pillow, you can always do that. Lean into it. It doesn't matter. As long as you're feeling the hamstrings, the back of the leg, that's all that we're really concerned with. Now, if you're pretty bendy, you're probably going to want to have that leg on the floor. But still, another modification for you to make, you can take the opposite arm of the hamstring stretching and round into it. This whole rounding action turns into a whole lot of side body stretch. I'll usually grab onto the outside of my wrist to start it, but after a while, when I feel like I'm opening up, I'll grab onto the outside of my ankle. And just, again, let gravity do the work here. I mean, I'll pull a little bit, but nothing too strenuous, right? Because that's going to overstretch us. And I'd rather you understretch than overstretch any day of the week, right? I don't want you to pull any muscles and then not be able to join us for tomorrow's practice or for the next few classes that we do. Which, by the way, tomorrow we're going to be doing Taoist yoga. the practice I believe we did on Monday, yeah, it was Monday, where we did a lot of strengthening poses. And it's a lot of flows, vinyasas, great for a balancing practice as a complement to this practice, for the yin practice. I recommend trying to go back and forth between the two. And that's what I've been trying to do with this particular schedule that I've been putting out. On Monday we did strengthening. Tuesday we did stretching. Wednesday, yesterday, if you joined us, we did a kids yoga class, but that was definitely a lot of strengthening. Today, stretching. Friday will be strengthening. Let's see, Saturday kids yoga. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm actually planning on doing this again as long as we're quarantined. I'll be releasing these classes as often as I can, at least one per day. And I'll be doing a few specialized practices as well, aside from just yin and yang strengthening, kids yoga. I'm planning on doing a chair yoga class as well for senior citizens, or just for people who struggle to get down onto the floor in general. But we'll get there when we get there. Good girl. Down dog. That's up dog. Show everybody how you down dog. Down dog. Down. Thank you. Good job. If you have a dog, they're going to join you, whether you want them to or not. Thank you. Lay down. Lay down. Go ahead and take a few deep breaths, and when you're ready, there's time. Use your hands. Slowly push yourself on out. Lean back. Lay down. Take your time in there. It might feel like a long way away, but just go ahead and relax for a minute. Try to feel the difference between the two sides. We've only stretched the one side. I'm sure it feels different as opposed to the other. Now, I do this for a reason, the one side at a time, because I want you to sense what you just did. A lot of times we can kind of get lost in that sensation if we've done both at the same time. But if you do one at a time, you can isolate it. You can say, oh yeah, this is what it feels like. This is what it feels like to stretch versus what it feels like to not stretch. Sorry about that. Someone's probably at the door. When you're ready, no rush, no hurry, you can flip over to the other side. Whatever side you're on, just make sure you are on the other side. So again, I'm not sure if we're all on the same page here, and that's okay. But if you're never sure which side you just stretched, again, close your eyes for a moment and just try to feel the difference between the two. A lot of times you can sense which side you stretch. It just feels different. It feels warm. It feels energetic. It might actually feel just loose or longer. Can happen in the practice. Actually, that's one of the direct benefits of this. Your muscles, your connective tissue can lengthen a little bit. Hey, buddy. And with this, again, other side, I'm doing a half butterfly pose. Leg is turning out with external rotation. But every pose, you're leaning over the extended leg, grabbing something like the knee, shin, ankle, foot, toes, if you can grab them. Could use a strap or a towel or a Pilates ring if you happen to have one. If you're really struggling to round in, use it. Right? Use it for leverage to pull you forward. Try not to pull back. Right? We want to bend forward because we're doing a spine series, and I'll talk why we're doing this one side at a time in a moment. But again, half butterfly is what I'm doing. External rotation involved here. You could do internal rotation, half frog pose. Same deal, lean forward. I personally don't do this pose. Like I mentioned, I'm feeling hip pain and knee pain. This is on both sides. I'm not even bending forward, but it's really excruciating pain. So I don't do that pose ever. But again, a lot of people out there, because of the way their skeleton is shaped, they're going to suggest and prefer doing those particular options. So not a better or worse thing. It's not a sign of being more or less flexible, right? It's a skeleton. And if all else fails, you could just do a dragonfly, right? Both legs out, just lean over the one leg you're going to stretch, whichever one that is for you. Grab on to something, knee, shin, ankle, foot, toes, if you can grab them. You can modify as much as you want. If you want to let your knee bend, feel free. There is no rule that says you have to lock this leg down. It's a common alignment rule I hear, but we need to throw alignment rules out the window because not everybody has the same alignment. We don't have the same skeleton. So whatever works best for you. And if you want to, you could always take the opposite arm of the hamstring stretching and try to round into it. Just again, for example, my right leg is being stretched right now. I can take my left arm and round into it, target my obliques, the side body a little bit. And it decompresses your spine in a different way. And we've talked about compression throughout the past few classes, but in case you're not familiar with it, if you're just now joining us for the first time, compression is when bones run into each other, squeezes together, or even two parts of the body run into each other. It represents the ultimate range of motion, right, when bones hit together. But what you're doing to your spine is called decompression. You're pulling your vertebrae away from each other. You're creating some space in between your vertebrae and your lower back. And we're also doing this at a different angle. What we're doing to our spine right now is called lateral flexion. You're bending it forward, but you're also going to a side. You're going to a lateral side. So it's a different way to bend the spine, as opposed to just bending directly down the middle, which is called flexion of the spine. And they're all important to do. Flexion, just direct forward bends, down the middle. Lateral flexion to the sides. Again, they are all important for us because these are all different ways that we move our back and move our body. So we want to continue to move them by taking them to all of their full ranges. And that's what we're going to be intending on doing in our practice today. We're doing flexion, lateral flexion. We'll do extension. We'll even do lateral extension. We'll do some rotations of the spine. We're doing a lot in our practice today. Go ahead and take a few deep breaths, and if you're ready, there's time. Use your hands. Slowly push yourself up, lean back, lay down, and take your time on it. Short breather. Relax while you can. In a moment, we will stretch the IT bands, but no rush to go there. When you're ready, no rush, no hurry. Make your way back for a comfortable seated position. I wanted to show a new pose today. Since we're doing a spine series, I thought it might be appropriate to do an IT band stretch, the outside of the leg, while doing another forward bend. You will find out pretty quickly whether or not your hips are going to want to do this, maybe even the knees. So if your body is not allowing you to do it, I'll throw out another pose. But the one that I'm going to suggest today is called the shoelace pose. Might be a little tough to visualize, but you have one leg tucked under. So try to imagine, if you want to do it on the same page, I have my left heel coming up and touching the right glute. And then you cross your right leg over and do your best to stack the knees on top of each other. The intention is to feel the outside of your right leg. So a nice broad stretch on the top leg here. So if you're on the other side, again, top legs, IT band, getting it. You might find out this isn't working. Some people can't cross their legs over, right? You can't get those knees stacked, and that's okay. You could always do what we call untie the shoelace. Just open it up a little bit and lean forward. Or you can do a different pose entirely. You know, we've been doing the swan pose, pigeon, right? We also call it. And that's the one I think we've done almost every practice. We have one leg in front, you have one leg behind, and it's the outside of your front leg that gets the stretch here. I'll show you from both angles here. But you lean forward into this one. Hands, elbows, head on the block, head on the floor if you can get there. I'll show you from the other side too. So again, outside of this front leg, leaning into it, hands, elbows, head on the block, head on the floor. Whatever you want to do, right? There's no right or wrong. But if the shoelace pose works for you, then I would recommend trying it out, just for the sake of doing something different, right? One of the things that I try to recommend to all of my students is try to learn at least 2, maybe even 3 different ways to stretch all of these target areas that we focus on. And the reason being is because our bodies are constantly changing. You know, if we're going to continue to do the same practice over and over and over again, we're not going to be able to change our routine, and we're not going to see different results, right? So we have to have different things, different poses to work with. But also one of the reasons is, you know, God forbid you get to your favorite pose, the all-time favorite pose that you do every single practice, and maybe one day it just doesn't work. You know, we don't want to just miss the area. We want to have plan B, plan C, maybe even plan D in our back pocket ready to go. So we can always do something else and still get the target areas stretched. This little puddle cat, he is quite the lap cat, right, buddy? Yeah. They're going to join you, again, whether you want them to or not, so don't fight it, right? If you have a little furry friend coming up and loving on you, it's going to happen. It's also a great test of your patience in your practice, more so with dogs than cats. Cats are usually pretty cool and calm when you do yoga. From my experience, dogs they can be quite a handful with it. So, you know, don't get mad at them. It's just all part of it. Think of it as like you're practicing your meditation. You don't get frustrated in your meditation. You just let it go and keep doing your best to focus on what you're doing. Let's hang out here for another minute. Go ahead and take a few deep breaths, and when you're ready, there's time. Use your hands. Slowly push yourself out. If you're in a shoelace, you're going to untie your shoelace. If you're in a swan pose, you'll push up and roll out of that. But you're going to lay down. Take a moment for yourself. Bring your furry friend with you if you want. There you go. When you're ready, no rush, no hurry. You can go ahead and make your way for the other side, whichever side you're on. Again, just making sure it is the other one. Now, I had suggested shoelace pose. If you're on the same page as me, which you might not be, is fine. But if you are, you're going to have your right heel coming under and touching the left glute, or at least pretty close to it. And then you'll have your left leg cross over, and you'll have the knees stacked on top of each other. Again, it does not have to be perfectly aligned. It could just be kind of there. Or we also had mentioned you might find out you can't cross this leg over. Again, some people just don't have the internal and the adduction to cross their leg over. So if you want to untie your shoelace a little bit, that's fine. Just make sure your knee and your hip are comfortable with it, right? We don't want to feel localized pain. We want to feel a broad stretch on the outside of the leg. I did suggest swan pose, pigeon, it's also known as. You have one leg in front, you got one leg behind. Again, it is the outside of the front leg getting a stretch when you lean forward into it. Hands first, elbows next, head on the block or head on the floor if you can get there. And I'll show you from the other angle too. But again, it is the outside of the front leg. Leaning in. Wherever you need to be. Just so we know, two sides are not the same. You might get to this side and say, you know what? Shoelace is not working at all. Maybe it worked totally fine on the other side, but on this side it's not happening. Don't beat yourself up, right? It's all a part of this. Again, that's your skeleton right there. That's usually telling you it's not happening. So you could always do something else. You could do your swan pose on this side. You could do, I think we had shown eye of the needle pose before at some point in the practice. That was last week though. Breathe into it. Some deep inhales, deep exhales. Feeling the outside of the leg. Nice and broad stretches. And the broad stretches, again, that's called tension. Tension is a broad stretch you can wave your hand to. Say, yeah, this whole thing right now is stretching. That is the pain that we can change. And over time, you will change it. You'll become more mobile. You'll become more flexible. You'll start working through your tension. And then you eventually reach your compression points where two parts of your body or two bones run into each other. Which I had mentioned, that represents the ultimate range of motion. The moment compression takes place, you aren't getting past it. And there are, again, two pains. It's either bones squeezing into each other or two parts of your body. It's pretty easy to identify between the two, especially with bone-on-bone pain. If you're feeling bone-on-bone pain, it's not broad. You'll be able to take one finger, point to a joint, and say, I feel like this right here is squeezing, it's pinching, it's coming together. That can take place in any part of the body, not just the hip. It could be the knee, it could be the ankle, neck, back, shoulder, elbows, right? That's the full range too. Actually, maybe this is a good example of it. When I take my arm out, the reason why it can't bend anymore is not because of any tension or tightness, it's because my humerus is hitting my ulna right here in the elbow. So I can't go anymore, but because the bones aren't allowing it. Right? That's pretty easy to see. But two parts of the body running into each other, like the stomach running into the legs, right? I can't get past this. This is still compression pain. Not that it's bone on bone, but it's still my body stopping me from going further. And being able to identify between all these things can really spare you from accidental injuries, especially if you're starting to hit bone on bone pain. You know, a lot of people, again, they're ignorant of these pains. They don't know what it's supposed to feel like, so they just push through it. And especially if you're pushing through compression pain, you can overextend something. It's really easy to hurt yourself. But if you know what that pain is, and you know the difference between bone-on-bone pain versus tension and compression, you know, it's going to spare you from that injury. But that's where it comes into trusting yourself and learning through experience. Go ahead and take a few deep breaths, and when you're ready, there is your time, real slow. Use your hands, push yourself up, lean back, lay down, take your time on it. May feel like a long way away, but you have a moment to do whatever you need. When you're ready, go ahead and make your way back for a comfortable seated position. We're going to stretch the quads next, and we're going to do one side at a time with our practice today, because I want to make it, again, more about the spine. But the quads are your upper thighs, right? Front of the legs, these really big, powerful muscles. And the first option I can give you is called the half bow pose. Half bow, you lay on your stomach, you can grab onto a foot, doesn't matter which one, and you pull it, right? The more you pull, more you get. So some muscular effort is going to be required with this particular pose. But if you can't grab the foot, this is where you can grab your pant leg, or you can use your towel or your strap. You just loop that over the foot here and pull on it. We actually have to grab something though, whether that's the towel or the foot itself. If we just let the knee bend like this and not grab it, you're not stretching your quads, you're flexing your hamstrings, and that's going to cause some serious knee issues for you, potentially even back issues. I'll talk more about that in a second. So make sure you're grabbing something. But another option for you, you could always do a half saddle pose. You have your knee bent and you're leaning back into the pose. Start with your hands. Usually this is enough, but if you need more, elbows are next. Laying on your back will be the full range of motion. But with all of these poses, hey girl, please make sure you are mindful of how your knee feels. If you feel any inside or outside of the knee pain, you are overbending it, in which case, please modify the pose. You may want to skip this pose if you're feeling it in this particular one. I would usually recommend a half bow if you're feeling knee pain. And that, you just have more control over the stretch. If it's too much, you let it go. If it's not enough, you just keep pulling. That's the beauty of muscular effort poses, right? If it's not enough, keep pulling. Too much, let it go. You're right out of the pose. It can be a little bit more difficult coming out of a pose that involves gravity. For example, the half saddle pose, or even a full saddle pose. Imagine both legs folded back. If you're starting to feel knee pain in one of those poses, it might be kind of tough to get out. So, use those muscular effort poses first if you're really, really tight. But after a while, you can switch it up once you start seeing the mobility increase. And I'm sure you've probably already seen it. If you've joined me for every practice that we've done so far, you're probably noticing a difference in your flexibility. Maybe it's just a little bit. Maybe it's just a couple millimeters, a couple centimeters. But that adds up. After a while, those centimeters turn into inches. Inches turn into feet. Before you know it, you're at your full range of motion. I mean, granted, it could take a couple of months to get there, but you'll get there. And something I like to remind my students of, new and old students, consider how long you've been living your life and you haven't been doing a practice like this. Most people don't know that you can stretch for an hour just to increase flexibility. So the more you do it, again, the easier this is going to be, the more flexible you'll get. You'll start working through all those years worth of tension, of tightness, of injuries. It takes time, right? But be persistent with the practice and be patient with the results. Those small milestones will come. When you are ready, there's time. Real slow, go ahead and let go of your half bow or roll away from your half saddle. That means go away from that bent leg and let it out slow. And take a moment, just lay down for a little bit, feeling the difference between the two sides. Most of our poses today we've done one at a time. So again, try to feel the difference. Other side. When you're ready, whatever side you're on, please make sure it's the other. But the two poses that I did recommend, the half bow, you lay on your stomach, grab onto a foot, and pull it. Just make sure it's the other one, right? The more you pull, the more you get. If you can't grab the foot, use your pant leg, or use a strap, or a towel, or a ring. Loop that over the ankle and pull on it, right? We actually have to pull something to get this stretch. Again, like I mentioned, you can't just bend your knee and not grab anything because you're flexing your hamstrings to do this. You're not stretching your quads. That's going to cause dysfunctional neuromuscular pattern, which I'll talk about here in a second. I mentioned it on the other side, but I'll go into more detail about it now. But the other option before we get too far ahead was the half saddle pose. You have your knee bent, you're leaning back. Start with your hands. If you need more, keep going, because elbows will be next, and laying on your back is full range. But again, just for the sake of me teaching the class, I'm not going to lay all the way down. You know, a lot of times you won't ask me for help, especially when we're doing this in person. If I'm laying all the way on my back in a pose and someone needs help, they're not going to ask me. So again, that's why I'm sitting upright, so in case you have some questions, feel free to type them in, and I'll get to them. But again, upper thighs, broad stretch here. Any knee pain, we're talking inside, outside of the knee. Localized, you are over bending the knee. So please don't do that. I don't want you to hurt your knee. But do your best to relax into it. Let the muscles soften. Again, if muscles won't soften, this is a sign of a dysfunctional neuromuscular pattern. I want to go into more detail about this because a lot of us have these things. Dysfunctional neuromuscular patterns are created through bad habits and through injuries. So, for example, if you've ever injured your knee, the muscles around it, with the neuromuscular system, it's probably accidentally created a reflex arc around it. So every time you would go to bend your knee, your quads and your hamstrings would start to flex. They'll start to lock up to try to tighten the joint. And this is a defense mechanism. But it's not something we want to aggravate by going further. We actually want to decrease it. We want to find out where can we be to still feel the stretch of the intended area, but not have all of those muscles start flexing on us. And little by little, we're talking over the course of weeks, months, maybe even years, at some point we can condition the neuromuscular system to learn how to relax again, and then we can correct that reflex arc and really fix the injury. I can't tell you how often people come up to me and they say, you know, I've had knee surgery. It was fine for 6 months, but now it's creeping up on me again. It's probably because it's somewhere in the neuromuscular system, which is why this has become such a popular therapy as of late, neuromuscular therapy. This is essentially what they do. They don't do it exactly like this, but the principle is exactly the same, where you hold a pose or a posture for a while, barely feeling the stretch, like that scale of 1 to 10. Maybe it's more like a 3 and a 4, but you're still feeling it and not having all of those muscles flex on you. And again, it takes time, but good news is it is something we can fix. Go ahead and take a few deep breaths, and when you're ready, there's time. Slowly letting yourself out. If you're in a half bow, let it go. Half saddles, roll away from that bent leg and let it out real slow and just lay down. We're going to do a back bend next and compress the spine a little bit. Sphinx pose and supported bridge are the choices today. Sphinx pose, you lay on your stomach, you prop up onto your forearms and your elbows. This is the pose. It's not a stretch. Now, we're actually feeling compression, dull and gentle pressure right here in the lower back. It can be very therapeutic for you when it's done in a dull and gentle way, and when it's also held for a while. Slow, static postures are the key. Maybe I'll talk more about that too in a second. But the other option, supported bridge. You have a block, you can put it under your back and lay on the block, right? This is the pose. Knees bent, feet on the floor, totally fine. But if you say, no, I could increase this a little bit. Slide your feet out. This is a deeper arc in your back. This is a deeper bend in this particular pose. You know, when we bring the knees up close to the chest, you see how the spine starts to round a little bit more. It starts to come forward. But with the legs extended, it lowers down, right? There's a deeper bend, deeper creation of the arc there. Up to you. But again, I'm going to do a Sphinx pose because I'm teaching. I want to be upright and be able to see everybody. So, again, forearms are fine. But if you'd like to, you could always lift your feet up off the floor. It will tilt your pelvis and your sacrum to go a little bit more forward. Increases the curve in your back. Might be okay. I'm not enjoying this right now. I'm feeling sharp pain in my back. My quads are starting to lock up. Remember how I talked about those dysfunctional neuromuscular patterns? That's happening right now. If I go too far into it, my quads will start locking up. And they want to protect my spine. They want to start pulling my spine forward with that. So I usually just keep my feet down. But if you do need more, you could extend the arms. This is called the seal pose in Yin, but it's also called upward dog or cobra if you've done any other style of yoga. Dull, gentle pressure here, but I'm doing it in a modified way. The reason being, if I bring my hands in any closer, my hips will come up off the floor, and that represents the ultimate range of motion. So again, here's me, arms out. But if you watch my hips here, you see how my hips are lifting up and my back hasn't changed at all? It's because I'm already hitting the full range. My full range is right about here. But here and here with the elbows down, it's a minimal difference. I mean, there are some days where I feel like it's necessary to push up. Most of the time, though, I'm just down here. Elbows. It's totally fine. And everybody's back bend is different. But it's critical for us to find out what exactly that degree is. You know, some people have contortionist-like backs, and others like me don't. You know, it's not a sign of inflexibility. It's my body saying it's not happening. But dull and gentle pressure in this is very therapeutic. Again, for everybody, it can be therapeutic. How it is not therapeutic is when you're doing it with rhythm and repetition. So think about this, right? We're doing this in a slow static pose, holding it for a while. But imagine you're doing this pose over and over and just hitting bones into each other over and over and over and over again. That is how we degenerate in our spine. It is one of the most common yoga injuries out there, where we're doing too deep of back bends and we're hitting the vertebrae into each other every single time. They will wear down within a few weeks to a few months. Again, one of the most common yoga injuries out there. But if you know what your skeleton can do, if you know how deep your back will bend, you won't go past that. Keep that in mind throughout your practice, not just with me, but in any style of exercise. You will learn a lot about yourself doing it. Go ahead and take a few deep breaths, and when you're ready, there's time. Real slow. Lay on your stomach if you're in a Sphinx. You can lay on your back if you're in supported bridge. Just lift the hips up and slide the block out. Rest for a moment. After a deep back bend, it's going to feel really nice to do a gentle forward bend. If you're not already there yet, you may want to head there. Child's pose, you can always do, or lay on your back and cradle the legs. Anything that's a gentle forward bend where there's rounding, go ahead and do it. We're going to do one more pose. We're not going to do it for the full 5 minutes to each side, but maybe a minute on each side. Just enough time for some energetic balance. We'll do a twist to each side, and then we'll wrap this practice up. So with the reclining twist, you're going to lay on your back, bring your knees up to the chest, take your legs over to the side, and lay them on the floor. This is the pose. And you're going to feel the side of the body, stretching obliques, outside of the leg. It's the top side here, right? Outside of that body. And again, we're only doing this for a minute, so let's just get comfortable in this. Let's not worry about too many modifications. Go ahead and take a few deep breaths, and when you're ready, real slow, unwind from your twist. Take time out. You can lay on your back if you'd like to. Bring your knees up to the chest. Just take a moment, and we'll get the other side. Hey, enjoy this? Thank you. Other side if you're ready. Whichever side you're on, just make sure it is the other one. So with reclining twist, you're laying on your back, bringing your knees up to the chest, take your legs over to the side, lay them on the floor. Make sure it is the other side here. Like I mentioned, we're only doing this for a minute, so don't worry about any modifications, just twisting into it. The rotation of the spine is what we're looking for. Go ahead and take a few deep breaths. And when you're ready, slowly unwind from your twist. And if you'd like to, you can just head right for Shavasana, corpse pose. So if you'd like, you can lay on your back. You can lay on your side. You can even lay on your stomach. You could sit upright like you're in meditation. Just wherever you're most comfortable, go there and close your eyes. Nothing to see at this point, just more to feel and pay attention to. Focus on your breath. Breathe low in your belly, low in your diaphragm. Turn your senses, your awareness within. And for these last few minutes, give your body a compare and contrast. How different do you feel right now as opposed to when you first started your practice today? no formal ending to our practice. Keep your eyes closed as long as you'd like, but that's officially all that I have for you. I want to thank you all for coming out, sharing your practice with me. It's been my pleasure. Namaste.